The silence in the pyramid quarry had a weight you could feel pressing against your spine, even before the first pale ray of dawn broke across the endless desert sky. You rose slowly, bones aching beneath the thin cloth that barely kept the cold from seeping into your skin, the chill biting sharper than the night before. The air was thick with dust, a heavy veil mingling with the sharp, acrid remnants of sweat, already dried and crusted onto your chest and back, beneath your bare feet. The uneven stone ground absorbed every heavy, reluctant step you dared take, each one dragging your weary body closer to the vast, silent pit carved deep into the earth. The quarry stretched before you like a sleeping giant, its edges blurred against the pale blue of the morning sky, silent but menacing. You could hear the faint scrape of stone against stone, your chisel lightly tapping, soft echoes bouncing, an unhurried metronome punctuating the stillness. The rough limestone you touched was unforgiving beneath your trembling fingers. It was cold, granular, and cracked in places, the surface uneven, as if it had absorbed centuries of secrets and bearing the silent weight of time itself. The heavy dust clung to your nostrils with a stubborn persistence, mingling awkwardly with the metallic tang of dried sweat that still lingered somewhere deep inside your throat. The air tasted faintly of stone and something older, something unspoken that settled heavily in your chest. Around you, the tools lay abandoned, their ropes frayed and rusted, creaking softly as the wind stirred. It was a harsh world, one where a dead phone battery today might feel like utter catastrophe. But here, a lack of water in this enormous stone silence meant the difference between survival and a nameless fate. Before the sun climbed fully, you gathered near the weak warmth of a meager fire, the feeble glow a brief comfort against the creeping chill that settled through your bones. The group around the fire shared a quiet breath, a momentary cluster of heat and hope, fragile as desert glass. But as the heat faded into the morning light, your hands drifted back to the stone, the previous respite swallowed by the endless grinding labor ahead. The polishing, the measuring, the endless tests of endurance against the weight of the ancient world. Time passed in loops, each motion repeated with slight variation. The brush of your fingers along the cold surface, the sway of your body as you bent and tested edges, ears straining against the distant hollow noises. Beneath the quiet routine, a subtle tension threaded through the air, unnoticed by many, but palpable to you. A shiver in the vast, still space, a shifting shadow behind the heaps of stone blocks. Then, without warning, a hush fell upon the quarry. The chorus of labor ceased momentarily, all heads turning as if something unseen had stirred beneath the jagged edges and dust. Your heart quickened in that slow, familiar way, part fear, part anticipation, as you felt the living silence pulse around you, grounding you in a stillness heavier than the stones themselves. Hey, before Morpheus takes you for good, quickly check if you're still subscribed. For some, the button disappeared, and I don't want you to miss the upcoming sleepy stories. Enjoy and leave a like soft as a pillow. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Your interaction keeps this little calm corner alive. Thanks for being part of it. You took a slow breath, the air thick and tasting of stone and dust as it filled your lungs and seemed to settle somewhere deep within your chest. The quarry held you in its silent grasp, vast and unmoving, the edges of the pit swallowing the faintest glimmers of early light. Your fingers grazed the rough limestone again, tracing the jagged contours with a patience born of exhaustion, your skin barely registering the granular texture beneath the weariness. Each tiny grain of stone seemed to whisper secrets too old and heavy to speak aloud. Your feet felt the cold weight of the uneven floor, and every hesitant step sent a muted crunch through the stillness. The ground, uneven and sharp, compelled you to move with measured care. The difference between a steady step and an unexpected stumble was a fragile thread you dared not sever. You could hear your breath, shallow but steady, blending with the distant scrape of chisel against stone, a rhythm that had become both your heartbeat and your anchor. The sun had risen a little higher, its feeble warmth reaching the edges of the pit, but never daring to fill its depths. The temperature remained unforgiving, pressing against your skin with persistent chill. You wrapped your arms around yourself for a fleeting moment, feeling the sharp bite of cold sweep beneath your thin covering. A faint metallic taste lingered at the back of your throat, a reminder of long hours, relentless labor, and the sweat dried hard on your body like brittle armor. The group around you moved in quiet harmony, their presence a steady pulse in the muted rhythm of the quarry. You found a brief reprieve near the crumbling edge, where the dust seemed thinner, almost settling beneath the fragile warmth of a weak sunbeam. Time stretched and thinned as you crouched, fingers brushing against splintered stone fragments, watching the faint glimmers of light catch on their jagged surfaces. The delicate balance of the moment grounded you, fragile, suspended between weariness and the stubborn grit of determination. You rose slowly, measuring each movement, muscles aching with the strain of endless repetition. The dull scrape of your tools falling from tired hands to the uneven ground echoed across the hollow space. You caught the faint rustle of a breeze slipping through narrow cracks, carrying with it the faint scent of earth and something else, something darker, older, unnoticed until now. A subtle shift in the air made the hairs on the back of your neck prickle. Your pulse quickened a fraction, the silence deepening around you, sharper now, as if the quarry itself had inhaled on the edge of some unseen breath. No words were spoken, and the others seemed to sense the change too. Their movements slowed, eyes flickering toward the shadows that clung just beyond the pile of broken blocks. The quiet hum of anticipation threaded through the collective stillness, taut and fragile. You found yourself scanning the edges where daylight hesitated, searching for a hint, a motion, the origin of that enclosed unease pressing deep beneath your ribs. Your hands pressed against the cool stone once more, fingertips trembling slightly despite your efforts to steady them. The surface was uneven, cracked in places, and cold enough to pull the heat from your skin. You traced a shallow scratch that caught the chaotic interplay of light and shadow, watching the pattern shift with the subtle tilt of your wrist. The touch was familiar, yet foreign, like trying to hold on to a fading memory. Behind you, the faint sound of movement barely disturbed the silence. You dared not turn, but the tension wound tighter. The slow, careful scrape of stone shifting against stone summoned a cautious alertness. Your ears strained, the ambient noises magnified in the absence of distractions, the distant clink of metal, the whisper of an unseen breath, the soft scuff as something or someone crossed the uneven ground with heavy deliberation. The day trudged on, relentless and monotonous. Your body moved through the motions, brush, tap, measure, repeat. Endless cycles folding back onto themselves, like the desert waves beyond the quarry walls. The stubborn dust clung to your skin and filled your nostrils, unyielding and ever-present. Every breath drawn was heavy with fatigue, every exhale a small surrender. Tangled shadows lengthened and shrank as the sun moved with slow certainty, stretching the thin light into long, wavering fingers that barely touched the depths where you worked. You paused at the edge of the pit, the vast dark cavity swallowing sound and light. A dry chill rose from the shadows, pressing upward like a folded weight. You peered carefully over the rim, your vision narrowing to catch any sign of life. Stirred in the gloom. Nothing stirred. Only the silent geometry of stone, piled high and unforgiving, offered a bleak comfort. You felt the pulse of the quarry, steady, slow, like a massive heart buried beneath the earth. And yet, within that vastness, something seemed to shift just out of sight. Your hands rested momentarily on the rough stone, your body leaning forward, the tension nagging behind your ribs, drawing your gaze to the faint imprint of a footprint pressed deep into the dust near the far edge. The outline was fresh, the edges crisp against the pale sediment. You held your breath, feeling the weight of that single mark tether you to a silent question. Had you been alone all this time? A distant rattle echoed faintly, a subtle reminder that this place never truly rests. The light around you twitched as a slow gust swept through the quarry, stirring dust motes into languid spirals. Your heartbeat slowed against the relentless tick of the day, but your mind hummed with cautious whispers, pulling your thoughts taut. You turned away, footsteps deliberate and careful. drawing you back into the moving cadence of work. The weight of the unknown pressed lightly against your skin, and yet beneath that, a strange resolve stirred. Something unspoken answered the silence, a promise that the next shadow stretched beyond the edges of familiarity. The quarry swallowed your figure once more, the pit before you dark and endless, its secrets buried beneath layers of stone and time. Just as the sun dipped low, painting the horizon with bruised shades of violet and gray, the silence was shattered by a distant, almost imperceptible sound. A slow, steady groan rising from the depths, beneath the very stones you had traced all day. The groan rose again, slow and deep beneath the stones, an ancient sound trembling through the quarry's cold veins, like a distant pulse. You stopped, heart tightening, as the endless emptiness below seemed to inhale sharply, swallowing each shudder of noise. Your breath grew shallow, the dust swirling in the cold air, settling softly against your face, whispering secrets only the silence could understand. The desert sky above faded into a pale sheet of gray, the light dimming as the sun sank lower, touching the quarry's edges with a bruised glow that barely reached the forgotten depths. Your fingers lingered on the rough stone at the rim of the pit, tracing the uneven surface with careful attention, like reading a faded script written by countless hands over centuries. The coarse texture scraped gently at your skin beneath the tired pressure, grounding you even as your mind spun quietly around the weight of what you just heard. Around you, the group's movement slowed, breaths held prisoner by the sudden stillness. A delicate tension stretched thin across the hollow space, as fragile as the dust motes drifting lazily in fading light. Drawn forward by a mix of dread and resolve, your feet brushed the cracked, uneven ground with tentative steps, each one measured and slow, the rough floor demanding all your focus to keep steady. The air smelled sharply of earth and sweat, dry and lingering like a memory you couldn't shake. Your eyes traced the walls of the quarry, catching every tiny shift of shadow as the setting sun carved long, trembling fingers across the stone. The groan reverberated once more, deeper and longer now, echoing beneath the quiet, like a beast slowly stirring from a long rest. You crouched near the edge, fingers brushing away loose dust, letting the cracked stones whisper beneath your touch, careful not to disturb the fragile silence. The subtle timbre in the air seemed to thicken, pressing gently against your skin, threading a slow pulse through your veins that refused to settle. Every breath you inhaled tasted faintly metallic, mingling with the lingering dryness seeping into your throat. Time folded over itself, each heartbeat stretching unusually long, your gaze never leaving the yawning darkness below. A cool wind slipped through narrow fissures, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible scent, something ancient and forgotten, like cracked leather left too long in the sun. It tangled with the dust, swirling softly at your feet, and the temperature shifted subtly, an invisible weight pressing down as your senses honed in on the dim outlines of stone blocks, piled like silent sentinels around the abyss. Somewhere near the far wall, faint rustling arose, the soft scrape of stone grinding over stone. It was slow, deliberate, impossible to ignore, but carefully contained, as if the quarry itself moved with a deliberate caution, wary of waking something long buried. Your shoulders tensed, breath held almost unwillingly as the silence tightened, every bone in your body alert, every nerve straining against the monotony of the tedious work you'd known since dawn. Yet beneath the tension, a quiet understanding settled. This was not a threat born of noise or haste, but of patience, a slow unfolding that demanded you witness more than just the surface. You allowed yourself a moment to look away at the desert beyond the quarry's edge, where the sky deepened into muted shades of violet and ochre. The breeze softened, carrying the faint warmth of the last daylight, like a whispered promise that something beyond this granite tomb still held a trace of life. You stood, arms crossing over your chest against the creeping chill, fingers trailing absently over the jagged surface of a nearby block. The coarse limestone crumbled slightly beneath your touch, sending tiny grains tumbling like quiet echoes of old stories. The group shifted quietly behind you, their eyes flickering between the pit and the growing darkness. None spoke. Words would shatter the spell of waiting that held the day in its brittle grasp. You moved with deliberate slowness, footsteps barely whispering over the stone floor, circling the edge of the pit. Your gaze caught the imprint again, fresh footprints pressed deeply into the dust, the sharp outlines stark beneath the dim light. You knelt beside them, finger tracing the faint ridges, feeling the subtle vibrations of something recent, something alive and unknown. The air was thick with unsaid questions, the weight of unseen watchers settling over your shoulders like a shadow. The groaning sound rose once more, longer now, a low lament, threading through the depths, weaving steadily into the silence like a slow awakening. The quarry seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a response you could not yet give. You pressed your palm flat against the cold limestone just beyond the last heap of stone, where the shadows merged with the desert dusk. Your eyes strained, catching the barest hint of something shifting, a gentle disturbance like the ripple of water on still sand. You held your breath as the moment stretched thin between tension and release, between the solidity you clung to and the unknown creeping steadily closer. Then, fading almost as quickly as it came, The motion vanished, leaving only the slow retreat of your own heartbeat ringing in your ears. The cold night pressed in from all sides, the pit below dark and waiting, the distant groan now a soft whisper barely trembling through the thickening air. You swallowed hard, breath cold and steady, knowing the quarry held more than just stone and silence. Beneath your feet, beneath the shadows, something breathed, stirred, and waited. The groan faded into a soft whisper, as if the quarry itself was breathing beneath your feet, deep, slow, and heavy with something almost forgotten. You lingered at the edge of the pit, fingertips resting on the coarse limestone, feeling the rough grain press through your skin, the stone steadily cold where the fading day no longer reached. Your breath came shallow, the dryness hanging low in your throat, an unrelenting companion to the dust that never seemed to settle. Around you, the others moved less and less, swallowed by quiet anticipation, their shadows stretching long across broken blocks, mirroring the dimming light. Your steps withdrew carefully from that fragile rim, the uneven floor a constant reminder that each movement required deliberation, the weight of a sudden stumble far too great. You moved slowly toward a pile of slabs, their edges jagged and worn, a testament to centuries of patient labor, and you sank to your knees, brushing away a fine layer of dust until the surface beneath emerged, cracked and pale. The scent of dry earth drifted weakly upward, mingling with a faint mineral tang that pricked your nostrils. The silence throbbed gently here, as if waiting for something, or someone, to break its fragile hold. Your fingers traced the uneven outline of an ancient symbol, carved too faintly to fully decipher, the shallow grooves catching what little light remained. It was a whisper of a past you could almost touch. You brushed loose particles from the worn edges, feeling the cold grit slip through your fingers, like memories dissolving to dust. Around you, the quarry held its breath. The low groan resumed, softer this time, yet nearer, trembling in the veins of the earth, pulsing with an ancient rhythm beyond your comprehension. Your eyes rose, scanning the horizon, where the last warmth of sun bled out into a muted lavender dusk. A brittle wind stirred, carrying a frail chill that teased the thin fabric draped across your shoulders. You wrapped your arms tighter, the chill cutting sharper here at the pit's lip, a cold that seemed to seep beyond flesh and bone into something deeper. In the distance, somewhere past the maddening quiet, a faint, rhythmic tapping began. Soft and uneven, it slipped through the patches of dust like a hesitant heartbeat. You froze, breath hitching with the sudden sharpness of sensation. The tapping repeated, slow, deliberate, as a presence made itself known, careful not to shatter the delicate balance. Your pulse tightened, every nerve coiled in taut readiness. You could feel the weight of unseen eyes threading through shadows, hidden just beyond clear sight. Your hands trembled as they returned to the stone, fingertips sliding across scarred surfaces with a reverence born of fatigue and wonder. The limestone beneath offered no warmth, but held steady like an old friend, grounding you in something real, something enduring. The heavy scent of sweat and dust mixed with the cool breath of evening, anchoring you to the moment stretched thin between exhaustion and alertness. The slow scraping returned, a sound like brittle stone shifting against stone. Cautious, but undeniable. It wound through the hollow spaces, brushing past the jagged walls like a whispered warning. You strained to catch another hint, a shadow, a flicker, but the light waned too quickly. Your gaze fell to the powdery ground, to another imprint, fresh and deep, pressed where dust once lay undisturbed. A pair of footprints moving inward toward the depths you dared not explore. You rose, every muscle aching with the accumulated weight of the day, and started a slow, deliberate walk along the pit's edge. Your eyes swept every broken stone, every jagged nook, searching for the source of restless disturbance. A faint metallic scent tickled your nostrils, sharp and bitter, layered beneath the ever-present dust, as if something old and hidden had been unearthed, disturbed. As you circled, the horizon bled darker, the stars beginning their slow vigil above the vast desert. The air cooled further, pulling restless shivers from the depths of your skin. Below, the pit swallowed even the faintest echoes, a void carved in silence and shadow. The groan rose once again, deeper now, resonating through the stone, an ancient lament threading itself through the earth like a slow, powerful breath. Your chest tightened with something you could not name, a quiet urgency pressing against the calm. Your fingers danced absently over the rough surface of a nearby block, tracing cracks that seemed to pulse faintly beneath your touch. The fragile dance of light and shadow flickered over the grain, a subtle reminder that beneath the stillness, the quarry waited, alive in its own patient way. The distant tapping slowed, then ceased. The silence fell again, heavy and watchful. For a moment, you thought you heard, whispering carried by the wind, faint voices of stone and dust, murmurs swallowed by the vastness. Your breath caught as a sudden movement flickered in the corner of your eye, a dark shape shifting behind shattered blocks at the edge of sight. You held still, heart thundering in the rigid cage of your ribs, watching as the shadow wavered, indistinct and elusive. It did not advance, did not break the fragile tension. Instead, it lingered, as if weighing the cost of revelation. Then, almost imperceptibly, the figure retreated, disappearing into the gathering gloom as silence reclaimed its throne. The quarry's breath slowed, the ancient groan fading to a distant echo that trembled faintly through stone and dust. You swallowed hard, senses sharpened, every fiber alert to the secrets pressed beneath your feet. The weight of the unknown, balanced just beyond the edge of your vision, too close to ignore, yet still cloaked in mystery. And as the night wrapped its cold fingers around the endless pit, you realized this was only the beginning. Beneath the stones, within the shadows, something long buried had woken, waiting silently beneath the endless dark. The quarry's breath seemed to hold still, hanging thick and heavy in the cooled air, as your eyes lingered on the shifting shadows just beyond the last pile of stones. The faint outline of that elusive shape, a mere flicker, stretched and wavered against the muted violet sky. You let the stillness fill your lungs, the dry dust settling gently into the creases of your skin, heavy as a slow heartbeat under fragile ribs. Around you, the others moved like ghosts, faces half hidden beneath scarves and hats, their movements careful, each step measured against a silent rhythm only this place could compose. Your fingers found the limestone again, rough against the pads of your skin, its jagged surface one more undeniable proof of the rawness beneath the calm. You traced a shallow crack, feeling the gritty texture leaking warmth from your own tired bones. The air tasted faintly metallic now, tinged with dust and the sharpness of something deeper, ancient and unyielding. Each breath seemed to inhale a fragment of history, thick with the weight of untouched secrets. You drew your arms across your chest, feeling the chilled scrape of fabric against skin, a thin shield barely enough to hold back the fading warmth. A breath caught in the distance, fragmented and tentative, a scraping sound, uneven and slow, like the deliberate warning of stone grinding against stone. Your gaze narrowed, pulling details from the unclear shapes around you. The earth beneath your feet felt alive, humming faintly under the dust, each grain catching the last pale light dipping behind crumbled blocks. That faint sound repeated, softly persistent, threading through the gathering dusk like a whispered lilt meant only for you. You stepped closer, toward the edge of the pit, muscles tensing with the awareness of each uneven stone beneath your boots. The air grew thicker, heavier, the cold creeping into your lungs with every inhale, shadowing your movements with a presence felt but unseen. Beneath your hands, the quarry hummed quietly, an old pulse echoing through your fingertips, and somewhere far below, the groan shimmered like a slow awakening, a breath finally finding voice after a long, silent sleep. You crouched low, fingers brushing away fresh dust, covering a small patch of limestone where ancient symbols faded into obscurity. Light and shadow played across the shallow grooves, painting stories too worn to be read fully, but palpable as weight against your skin. The scent of dry earth mixed with something darker, like leather left too long forgotten beneath a blistering sun. curling around the dry metal tang, still lingering in the air. The distant tapping grew more defined, a deliberate sequence folding over itself slowly, cautiously. Each beat a cautious call reverberating through the quiet. Your heart kept pace, a steady, deliberate rhythm beneath the stillness, matching the rise and fall of your calm breaths. Everything around you felt stretched thin, the air taut with unspoken anticipation, a fragile balance holding the night in place. Beyond the rim, footprints plunged deep into the fine sediment, their edges sharp and fresh. You knelt beside them, fingertips following their contours, feeling the impression's stubborn presence, like a signal etched with urgency. Questions pressed like the weight of the cold stone beneath you. Had you truly been alone? Or was there something lingering in the silence, watching, waiting? As you rose, a faint metallic scent teased your nostrils again, sharper now, the bitter edge weaving through the dust and sweat layered thick upon your skin. You moved deliberately, circling the pit's edge, eyes sweeping over every broken block, every crevice bathed in shadows deepening under the fading light. The groan thrummed again, low and resonant, a slow, mournful rumble threading through the stone, ancient and alive. A muted call you barely dared to answer. You're a nearby block, feeling the subtle tremors beneath the grain, as if the stone itself breathed beneath your touch. The quarry's stillness felt alive, a silent sentinel holding on to secrets wrapped in layers of dust and time. Suddenly, a brief flicker caught your eye, a shadow shifting just beyond the broken stones, a delicate ripple against the darkening tinge of the desert. You froze, breath shallow, every nerve attuned to the fragile dance of light and shadow. The shape wavered, never solidifying, drifting uncertainly like a breath held too long. The figure didn't approach or vanish outright. It lingered, caught between presence and absence, weighing the fragile boundary between revealing and hiding. A tension thickened, binding you to the moment, the air humbling beneath the unseen gaze. Then, slow as the coming twilight, the shadow slipped back into gloom, swallowed whole by the gathering dark. You stood silent, senses honed sharp, the air vibrating with a quiet weight that twisted beneath your skin. The groan faded to a low whisper, melding with the night wind, a sound threading through the quarry's bones, a breath carried beneath stone and dust, secrets breathing beneath your feet. And as you turned away from the abyss, a subtle, chilling movement pressed softly across the rim beneath your palm, an unmistakable tremor, faint but deliberate, a heartbeat not your own, rising like a slow, patient pulse just before the dark swallowed the day whole. The night deepened around you, stars casting cold pinpricks through the velvet canopy above the desert. Your feet pressed slowly against the uneven limestone floor, each step careful and deliberate. The air hung heavy with dust and the faint metallic bitterness lingering deep inside your throat. The quarry's groan had faded into a distant whisper, but the weight of it seemed to ripple through the stones beneath you, an ancient heartbeat thudding just beyond reach. You moved along the rim of the pit, hands brushing over jagged edges that crumbled slightly beneath your fingertips, sending tiny grains tumbling like echoes of some forgotten time. The stones were cold, rough as they whispered their secrets quietly, hiding stories in the cracks and fissures, worn smooth by centuries. Every surface seemed to pulse faintly, as though the quarry itself was breathing slowly in the darkness. Your eyes caught another imprint in the pale dust, a shallow groove, fresh and unfamiliar. You sank to your knees, tracing the outline with a trembling finger. The edges were sharp, like they had been pressed in. Urgency, but there was no sound, no movement, only an eerie silence that clung to the air like a second skin. Somewhere deep beneath the weight of rock and sand, something watched. You felt it, the quiet thrum behind the steady rhythm of your breath. A fragile wind stirred, lifting dust motes into lazy spirals that flickered faintly in the waning moonlight. The temperature dropped, cold seeping through your thin layers until it pressed softly against your skin like a whispered warning. You clasped your arms around yourself, feeling the brittle bite of chill slip beneath fabric and flesh, settling beside the dull ache heavy in your bones. Faint sounds drifted from the far side of the quarry, slow shifts of stone scraping over stone, careful and measured. Your head tilted, ears straining to catch the soft, sharp scraping, like fingernails grinding in cautious warning against cold granite. The group behind you stilled, their breaths shallow, movements all tensed and tight, as though the air itself had become thick and unyielding. No one spoke. The quarry held its breath with you. Your fingers found the familiar roughness of limestone once more, tracing a shallow groove carved faintly into a centuries-old block. It was worn nearly smooth, but the shallow scratches caught the silver light like the skeletal remains of some half-forgotten message. You brushed loose dust carefully away, feeling the grit slip like uneven memories through your skin. The scent of dry earth mingled with something older, faint leather, burnt and brittle, curling beneath the ancient stone. Slow, deliberate tapping began again, not steady now, but uneven, a hesitant pattern folding in and out of silence. Your heart matched its. Careful cadence, slow and steady, daring to listen. The sound cut through the pressing quiet like a fragile thread pulled taut. You froze, breath caught with the weight of watching unseen eyes. The quarry wrapped you in its dark embrace, its vastness swallowing all light and sound, except for that tap, a call or a warning. You rose, each movement conscious, muscles aching but alert. Around the edge of the pit, your gaze swept over the many broken stones, scattered like sleeping giants, their jagged forms casting long shadows that merged with the encroaching night. A sharp, metallic scent tickled your nostrils again, sharper this time, biting beneath the stale dust and dry sweat, as if rust had been awakened beneath the layers of stone and time. A shadow shifted near the far wall, a subtle ripple that teased the boundaries of vision, too quick and slight to grasp fully, but undeniable. You held your breath. The shape hovered, wavering on the edge between presence and absence, like smoke drifting too close to a fading flame. The air thrummed with tension, each second stretching long and thin, until the shadow melted slowly back into darkness, swallowed by the gathering gloom. No relief came, only the silent understanding that you were not alone. The quarry whispered in its timeless language of dust and stone, a slow pulse beneath your skin, heavy and ancient as the earth itself. You pressed your palm, flat against the cold rim of the pit, grounding yourself in the turning moments, letting the quiet thrum settle into your bones. A sudden tremor pulsed beneath your touch, faint but sharp, a steady heartbeat curling beneath the limestone. Your breath caught as the weight of it pressed lightly through your fingers, warm and deliberate. The groan, the tapping, the faint shadow, all folded together into a slow awakening, a promise that beneath the still depths, something had stirred and was waiting. The darkness deepened, swallowing the fading light, the cool night closing in like a shroud. You pulled your thin covering tighter around your shoulders. The cold, a distant companion, now merged with an unfamiliar urgency rising within your chest. The empty pit yawned before you, endless and silent, but nothing there was truly still. Something moved beneath the surface, stirring with patient intent, a slow, waiting breath held close under layers of stone and dust. And as you turned away from the abyss, that tremor pulsed once more beneath your palm, steady, alive, and for a fraction of a heartbeat, you swore the quarry whispered your name too softly to catch. You stood at the edge once more, the cold limestone biting into your palms, as the fading warmth of the day slipped away beneath the bruised horizon. The pit yawned, vast and silent, swallowing the last pale light in its depths. A black mouth stretched wide beneath the endless sky. Your breath came in slow, deliberate pulls, thick with dust and the lingering sharp taste of rust beneath your tongue. each exhale vanishing into the chilled air like a soft surrender. The wind whispered low through the distant fissures, bearing with it the scent of dry earth and something heavier, something ancient and slow, like the steady decay of forgotten stone. You flexed your fingers against the coarse surface, each grain pressing stubbornly into your skin, an unyielding reminder of time's weight here. Around you, the others lingered in motionless waits, their shadows stretching long and fused alongside the jagged heaps of broken blocks, an unspoken unity held by the unseen pulse threading through the quarry. Your feet shifted cautiously across the uneven ground, each step measured and slow, the rough stone demanding careful balance. Somewhere deep beneath, the quarry murmured again, a low groan folding out like the steady throb of a hidden heart. You could feel it as much as hear it, vibrating up through the sole of your boot, during the stretch of silence, where only the rhythm of your breath marked the passing moments. The faint tapping began anew, hesitant and uneven, shuffling its way through the quiet, like a ghost reluctant to reveal itself fully. You tilted your head, every nerve reaching outward, straining for shape or shadow. The distant sound merged with the rasp of wind, weaving a fragile pattern of cautious calls and answered silence that caressed the cold stone and dust. Your pulse slowed, matching the measured tempo, an odd comfort in the rhythmic certainty. Slowly you knelt beside a chunk of fractured limestone, fingers tracing the shallow, faded carvings barely holding on to form beneath a thin layer of settling dust. The grooves were worn smooth by centuries, yet they spoke softly, a tongue forgotten, but somehow familiar, the brittle edges like echoes of a message just out of reach. The scent of dry leather curled through the air, mingling with the acrid tang of sweat long dried on your skin, anchoring you to a time stretched infinitely backward. Your shoulders hunched against a sudden chill that threaded along your spine and seeped beneath your thin layers, biting deeper than mere cold. The quarry's vast silence seemed to press upon your chest, the air thick with unspoken watchfulness, layered heavily like the dust that settled over every surface. Somewhere toward the far wall, a subtle movement fluttered, a dark ripple folding in and out of sight, like a shadow caught in hesitant flight. Your breath held still, caught between the pull of curiosity and the coil of caution tightening within. No clear form emerged, no sound but the soft retreat of disturbed dust, and yet you felt the presence, a patient waiting something, hovering just beyond the pale reach of fading day. You rose with slow deliberation, footing steady despite the ache in your joints, hands brushing lightly over chipped stones and broken edges that whispered beneath the touch. The familiar roughness offered a grounding that steadied your mind even as the unknown unfurled slowly in your chest. Your eyes found the imprint again, footprints pressed deep and sharp against the fragile sediment, fresh with urgency. You knelt once more, fingertips tracing the hard edges, sensing the invisible weight of intention behind them. The silence held tight around that quiet signature, as though time itself paused to listen. An uneasy stillness sang between the moments, broken only by the distant, steady groan that rose from the core of the quarry, a slow lament threading through the carved stone veins. Steps behind you shifted softly. You turned with deliberate slowness, eyes narrowing into the dim outlines of the group. Each face was shadowed, marked by the same taut tension that gripped your own senses. No words were spoken. The air felt charged, a fragile drumbeat of breath and waiting. The cool light from a flickering fire near the quarry's edge cast long, trembling shadows that danced and stretched like memories reaching through the darkness. You sank beside the weak warmth, hands clasped tightly, as the cold buried itself deeper into muscle and bone. The air tasted even sharper now, metallic and biting, threading its way through the dust thick on your tongue. Gradually, the steady tapping gave way to a rasping sound, faint, deliberate, like stones grinding slowly against one another, too careful to startle the night. Your gaze swept toward the dark far corner, where shadows pooled thickest. Senses rode quietly through the tension. With slow, deliberate care, a shape flickered there again, barely more than a ripple, fading with the patience of something unwilling, yet unable to hide completely. Your heart thrummed, a careful rhythm, each beat a steady drum in the quiet symphony of the gathering dusk. The groan rose once more beneath the surface, lower, deeper, a slow conversation between stone and silence. It wrapped itself around your limbs, a haunting pulse that slid through every fiber of your being. You pressed your palm flat against the rim of the quarry, the cold limestone unyielding beneath your touch. A faint shiver ran through your body, not from the chill of the desert night, but something else, something alive and patient beneath layers of dust and rock. The tremor beneath your hand beat like a hesitant whisper, an echo brushing against your skin, answering some ancient, wordless call. The darkness deepened in waves, swallowing the last hues of dusk as your breath slowed and steadied. And just as you turned slowly away from the edge, a subtle, almost imperceptible motion pressed against your palm, a soft, deliberate pulse that stretched beyond feeling, a slow, sure heartbeat rising beneath the stone. The quarry waited, breath held quietly in the silent folds below, and you knew with a certainty that settled deep and slow, this was only the beginning. The night around you thickened, heavy as a stone pressed deep into water. Your breath floated faintly in the cold air, a slow rhythm kept only by the fragile certainty of your own survival. The quarry swallowed light and warmth in equal measure, turning the edges of the pit into dark, unyielding scars beneath the pale gleam of stars. Your fingers remained pressed against the jagged rim, the rough limestone cold and unrelenting beneath your skin, anchoring you as thoughts spiraled quietly, drawing you deeper into a still moment suspended between dusk and dawn. You shifted weight delicately, limbs aching with the day's labor, each movement a calculated balance against the uneven floor that threatened a harsh misstep. The stale dust swirled softly in the fragile wind, whispers of forgotten earth rising to brush against your face. The scent of sweat and stone melded tightly, a dry metallic tang clinging to your tongue like a bitter promise etched into memory. Somewhere beneath that vast silence, the quarry breathed and crept, pulsing slow and steady, an ancient heartbeat echoing faintly beneath your soles. A subtle scrape, stirred near the far edge, barely more than a hint, yet sharp enough to cut through the brittle quiet. You tensed, every nerve alive and attuned to the shifting shadows that pooled beyond the fractured stones. The air thickened, a silent pressure settling low on your chest as you caught the tremble of slow, deliberate movement. The group behind you hushed as one, the collective breath held tight, their eyes flickering like dying embers caught in a slow wind. Your gaze narrowed, seeking the source of that faint, insistent sound. Closer now, a delicate pattern emerged. The scrape repeated, steady yet cautious, like a whispered secret, spoken only to the stones. The brittle rhythm flickered and paused, folding into silence before gathering in a soft crescendo. Your feet, heavy but steady, shifted toward the boundary of shadow. Each step calculated and slow enough to feel every grain of limestone pressing back beneath your skin. The cold night air carved into your lungs, sharp and cleansing, steadying the tremor of unease deep within your gut. You knelt beside a small outcrop where the dust lay thinnest, brushing it gently away to reveal a faded array of markings, curved lines, and worn glyphs half buried beneath the sediment. The coarse limestone used to shape such symbols held the weight of forgotten stories in every shallow groove. Your fingers traced the worn curves, light slipping softly through the thin veil of cold mist settling at the quarry's lips. The scent of dry leather stirred faintly once more, an echo of sun-baked memory and slow decay. The tapping sound morphed as if responding to your presence, mutating between hesitation, then persistence. Your heartbeat slowed and deepened to match, each cautious note folding around your ribs like a whispered lullaby from another age. The stillness around you thickened, the world shrinking down to the slow pulse of breath and chisel. Dust particles suspended in the weak glow of a moon reluctant to shine fully. A breeze moved swift and low, carrying with it the faintest taste of something old and sharp, like iron worn dull with time, and you hugged your thin covering tighter, cold threading carefully beneath the fabric to settle deep, quietly chilling muscle and marrow alike. Beside you, the scattered shadows clung to the stone piles, long figures frozen close to the earth, watching as you followed the fading trail of footprints pressed deep into pale sediment. You knelt again, fingers tracing each edge with reverent hesitation, as if the dust-bound footprints held a silent message meant only for you. The grooves felt alive under your touch, subtle vibrations humming beneath the quarry's surface. Each detail pulled you further into the quiet mystery, the boundary between waking and dream softening at the edges. Your ears caught a faint rustling nearby, movement careful and contained, as a shadow slipped with deliberate slowness behind a cluster of broken blocks. You held still, breath held steady but shallow, heart shifting its pace to the delicate rhythm of unseen steps. The shadow hesitated, hanging just beyond sight, a thin ripple dissolving into the gathering night without sound. It lingered, an undecided presence clinging to the fragile edge between revelation and retreat, before folding back into the darkness without breaking the quarry's fragile spell. The maximum silence returned, the night pressing, heavy and patient. A low, slow groan rose again beneath the stones, resonating through the timeless folds of earth, like a wounded breath finally finding voice. You pressed your palm flat against the rim, feeling the cold limestone pulse faintly, a tremor coaxed upward from hidden depths. The groan threaded through your bones, weaving urgency into the heavy stillness weighing down your chest. In that eerie connection between flesh and stone, you recognized the quarry as more than mere dust and rock. It was a living sentinel, vast and patient, holding secrets folded tightly beneath layers of ancient stone. As the stars wheeled overhead, distant and indifferent, you stepped back slowly, muscles taut with bone-deep fatigue, mind swimming in questions you could not yet speak aloud. The night lies thick around you now, sharp and quiet. The chill brushing across your skin like a slow, invisible breath. And just as your fingers relinquished the rim, and you felt the cold cave inward, with a whisper almost too faint to catch, a sudden crack split the silence below. A thin fissure raced through the limestone like a breaking pulse, widening slowly, echoing far and faint beneath the endless dark. The crack widened slowly, a fragile fissure, racing like a pulse beneath the limestone, echoing faintly in the deep silence of the pit. You stood still, breath shallow, anchored by the cold stone that pressed stubbornly into your skin. The night wrapped around you, vast and patient, holding its secrets tight. Yet beneath the weight of the quarry's endless dark trembled, subtle but unmistakable. The groan you'd heard drifting through the stones was no longer distant. It grew into a living murmur, a deep breath rising from the earth itself. Your eyes trace the jagged edges of the pit, now alive with the faint glow of phosphorescent veins, pulsing with quiet light that seeped through cracks like veins beneath skin. The air thickened with the scent of damp stone, warm earth, and something ancient that slumbered no more. Behind you, the group stirred, their quiet movement cautious, but drawn by the stirring beneath the surface. Faces once shadowed by exhaustion now held sparks of unease mingled with wonder. No one spoke. The quarry's breathing filled the space between you all, a slow hymn to secrets peeled back from stone and time. You knelt at the rim once more, fingertips pressed against the limestone, feeling the heartbeat now as a slow, pulsing warmth. It was alive, this place, this vast grave of forgotten toil and whispered histories, breathing through you. The fresh footprints at the edge, the wary tapping, the pulse beneath the dust, each became clearer, pieces of a story unfolding in that suspended dark. In the faint phosphorescence, a figure emerged, slow and deliberate, slipping from the shadows beneath the blocks, like a wisp of desert mist, losing itself to dawn. Not quite solid, it shimmered with the fragile weight of unanswered questions and ancient promises. Yet there was no threat in its careful approach. Instead, it reached toward you with something almost like recognition, the faintest edge of an invitation buried in its silent presence. For a moment, time stretched thin and fragile as you met that ghostly motion. The quarry's long-held voice whispered around you both, a slow unspooling of centuries folded into a single breath. The figure's shape stabilized, revealing worn lines etched into its surface, remnants of a life once carved from this very stone. A worker, a keeper of stories made flesh and memory, and now a guardian returned. As the first true light of dawn brushed the horizon, the shadows retreated like a breath released. The pulsating glow faded gently, dimming into the slow, steady cadence of stone settling back into rest. The figure lingered a moment, a silent sentinel, before folding once more into the earth's embrace, leaving behind only the soft echo of footsteps in the dust. You rose slowly, the chill finally lifting as the warmth of morning crept across the quarry's jagged edges. The air felt lighter, as if the stones themselves freed a long-held weight. Around you, those who'd labored beside you exhaled deeply, their bodies relaxing into the moment's calm. The endless cycle of labor, dust, and sweat had transformed into something else, a quiet remembrance, a bond stitched into the quarry's heartbeat. As you stepped back from the pit's edge, the sun climbed steadily, casting golden hues across the rough limestone and cracked earth. The air carried the scent of dry stone, warmed by light, and whispered promises of return and renewal. The vast silence no longer pressed heavily against your chest, but settled softly, like a well-worn blanket wrapping around tired bones. You traced your fingers along the smooth erosion of stone, feeling the stories worn into every groove and scar. The quarry was silent now, but alive. The steady pulse beneath the earth, joining with the steady rhythm of your own breath. Time stretched outward, carrying with it the hopeful cadence of a slow, enduring peace. The distant tapping ceased, replaced by the gentle rustle of morning winds, weaving through broken stones and shifting dust. You closed your eyes briefly, letting the cool air fill your lungs. At last, the weight of the unknown melted gently into calm acceptance. The ancient breath beneath you had found stillness once more, and so had you. In that quiet dawn, the quarry no longer whispered of mysteries and shadows, but hummed softly with the promise of new stories waiting patiently to unfold. You stepped away, muscles loosening, the ache in your limbs dissolving into the gentle light. Behind you, the pit lay vast and serene, cradled in the emerging day, like a sleeping giant finally at rest. Under the broad desert sky, wrapped in the warming glow of morning, you let your breath slow and steady, the dust settling now like a soft sigh. The quarry's secrets were buried once again beneath silent stone, but the pulse of life and memory marched quietly forward, carried on endless waves of wind and light. You turned toward the horizon, the desert stretching infinite and calm before you. The weight on your chest lifted, replaced by a slow, steady peace. The perfect quiet for closing eyes and surrendering to the gentle embrace of sleep. And as the sun crowned the earth, the vast, silent world held its breath, a timeless lullaby whispered through stone and shadow, softly, endlessly, into the night that comes after day.